jump straight in. I like your style. Mate, I want to talk about anger.
Yes.
Talk to me about it.
Okay. Well, first, my name is Michelle Farris. I'm a psychotherapist, and in my internship, I actually taught the 52-week anger management class,
Wow.
and I fell in love with it because most of us have anger issues, and we're not taught how to deal with this emotion. So I love teaching anger because the skills are really easy to use.
It's definitely something that a lot of people struggle with, right? Like I've had
Yeah.
the honor and
Yep.
privilege of coaching a lot of kids over the years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's a big I guess string to the bow. And a big
Yeah.
passion of mine is teaching the younger ones, right? And I
Hmm.
especially like the ages between 12 and 18. Because it's a little bit of a,
Yeah.
to put it, a buggered time. Things are always changing, they're figuring out what's
Right.
going on, and I like
Mm.
the kids that, coin a phrase, the fucked up kids,
Yeah.
right? The ones
Yep.
that are kind of just discarded, probably the ones that you would have seen throughout the anger
Right.
management course. I like those kids. They're very
Mm.
interested, and yeah, it's definitely something close to my heart. So when I saw you pop up, I was like, this is awesome. Like I got to have
Oh,
this conversation.
I love that you do that. I taught my son how to deal with his anger when he was growing up, and I would give him like a cardboard box and a plastic bat. And because at 10 or 11, they're
Yeah.
angry, but they can't, or a trampoline. The trampoline was actually the best thing because it's better not to simulate violence by hitting, but if you can pound something in a healthy way, like your body on a trampoline, that can really get the energy out for kids, which is great.
Where would you say it originates from? This overwhelming anger that a lot of us have.
I think a lot of it is because we stuff it. Like even babies are angry. I mean, it is a natural emotion. And if we don't realize that and learn to cultivate and express it in a healthy way, it's going to come out in unhealthy ways. And I know for a lot of people who grew up in dysfunctional families, if they grow up seeing unhealthy anger, they do one of two things. They either do the exact same behavior they saw, right? Or they do the opposite. I did the opposite. I grew up seeing somebody who raged. So I decided I was going to stuff my feelings. And I thought that was the healthier version, only to realize in adulthood, it's like, oh my God, if I'm stuffing it, then all it's going to take is somebody to poke me one day and I'm going to blow because all that stuff has to come out. So I agree. I think if we could teach kids to deal with their anger early, and that's what I really talk about a lot in my anger class, is teach these skills to your kids because, oh my God, the world would be a different place, right?
Mm. It really is like a pressure valve, right? We try and hold on to it so much, and then it just bursts. It's like
Right.
maybe we should slowly ease that bad boy out and let off some steam, to pardon the pun, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Like we have a lot of conversations, coaches, whether it's female to male or whether it's the male
Yeah.
male dynamic, and it's like, well, like how do we coach the kids? Because
Hmm.
essentially we gotta get them to use that energy, otherwise they're gonna end
Right.
up using it on the street.
Right.
I'd rather them
Right.
use it within the four walls of a gym. It's a lot more constructive, right?
Yeah. Well, and boys tend to get socialized more towards anger, and women or girls tend to be socialized more away from anger. So I think part of it too is absolutely physical outlets, especially for boys, but also just learning how to name your emotion. Because sometimes what I've noticed men and women do is that they don't want to label hurt, sad, afraid, so they go to anger because it's a more powerful emotion and they don't feel hopeless in it. They feel like they can do something. Whereas sometimes that's not really the right emotion to feel. If you really are feeling anger, that's fine. But sometimes it can be other emotions that people don't know how to identify.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the most of the time, right? Like, and it's speaking for myself, like that's
Right.
it's definitely the case. You want to numb everything else because it hurts. It doesn't feel good. But that
Right.
anger, you can end up creating things out of it and destroying a hell of a lot more things out of it as well, like especially socially.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's like this sheet of armor that a lot of us like to go to first time, right?
Yes.
It's like, oh,
Right.
I'm gonna numb
Right.
myself, I'm gonna get really annoyed, I'm gonna get really pissed off and angry, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna fight the
Right.
world. It's like, well, when does that stop? Like, how
Right.
long can you do that?
Well, and when you think about it, anger is the sign that something isn't okay with you. And so if you can catch it in that early stage of, let's just say you're going along in your day, you're fine, and then something happens and you're mad, it's like, if people can stop at that moment and say, okay, what just happened? Because I guarantee most people are going to go, oh, you know what? Somebody said something to me that bothered me. My boss chewed me out. Something triggers it, but we don't pay attention to it. So we let it build and build and build throughout the day. And then we go home and we yell at our kids or we yell at our
Mm.
maid or whatever. But in its healthy form, anger is meant to tell us that something's not okay. Somebody's either crossed your boundary, said something you didn't like, did something you didn't like. And that's your cue to say, hey, you know what? That's not okay. Let's talk about it. Or I need to do something to take care of myself around whatever just happened.
Well, I love that way to think about it. That's um that's really strong. I love that way of thinking about it.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, think about it. When we're angry, right? Something isn't okay. And we need to honor that. And with
Mm.
kids, it's the same thing. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe they don't feel good about themselves. Maybe their parents are pressuring them to get better grades and they're not a good student. It's like there is some natural need or circumstance that is not okay. And if they don't have the tools to label it and actually verbalize it, they're going to act out in an unhealthy way.
It's crazy, right? Because a lot of the time, anger is associated with violence, and that is the
Yeah.
only way it can go,
Yeah.
rather than this reflective.
Right. Right.
Actually, there's a boundary crossed. I need
Right.
to understand myself. I need to understand the environment or the situation that crossed
Right.
said boundary. How can
Right.
we reassert that boundary and be like, hey, just to let you know, this is going to be a wow. It's more of a constructive than a destructive way. Like, I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. I think
Good.
it's what people need to know.
Yeah. And, because you work with kids, the other thing that's really important is that we have to allow our kids to be angry at us. Like,
Mm.
if my son's mad at me, I'm not going to say, don't feel that way. I'm going to say, what happened? Tell me why you're mad. But if parents are too threatened to do that, and we want to shove that anger away or make our kid bad for feeling what they feel, it's just going to increase. But if we can actually see that, wait a minute, my kid's mad at me, maybe there's a grain of truth in what they're mad at that I need to look at. Because that to me is effective parenting and how you can use anger as a teaching moment.
It definitely has been a popularization of this dictatorial manner, right? Of these like parental figures or a
Yep.
coach or
Yep.
some sort of guardian figure of just like, this is the way,
Right.
shut up and just kind of
Yep.
move forward. And I'm like, well, okay,
Right.
if we're going to dissect this apart, there's pros and cons, right? You're like, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to need to do that. But the majority of the time, more than
Right.
likely not. It's like, well, you're going to create a lot of distrust, and these kids are going to
Right.
not understand what's going on within their own selves. Never mind like the teamwork and the relationship and the dynamic between them and an elder, and yeah,
Right.
like opening up, communicating with them. Like I like
Yeah.
this. I like an exercise of exercise again. Pardon the pun. You bring them in a lot of ADHD, a lot of
Yeah.
ADD, anger management, all that type of stuff. You get them in. You go take them through a workout. You facilitate a little bit of physical expression. They're a little bit
Love
more
that.
tired now,
Yep.
right? And then you give them a notebook and you give them a pen and
Mhm.
you just kind of be like, right, you got 10 minutes. Nobody's allowed to talk. And you're going to go do your thing. You're going to clean the whiteboard or whatever. You give them that space so you're not just staring at them, because otherwise they're going to
Mm.
feel a little intimidated, right? And then they don't have to share. They can if they want. They don't have to share. And I found that over time, these small humans end up understanding this character and these emotion
Yeah.
and these feelings that they have. And then again,
Mm.
just with interaction between adults, they end up getting the vocabulary to then being able to express it. And you're like, huh, maybe this physical exercise has dropped that barrier.
Oh yeah. I think that's so perfect that you did that first, especially for boys, because they need
Yeah.
that outlet. And then to write, that's the uncensored version. So
Yeah.
nobody, like you said, nobody has to read it. I love pairing those two together. I love that you're doing that because that's so powerful.
But the guys are definitely the unevolved part of the species. You know, it's like you just gotta go a little bit more barbaric and a bit more animalistic. They're like, oh, okay, you want me to do that? It's like, oh, go, okay, cool. Like, are we able to evolve a little bit more here, guys? Like, let's
Right.
develop a little bit more of the IQ or
See, now to
EQ.
me, after you do that second, the writing, that next step would be how do you verbalize it? Like, how do
Mm.
you tell your kid, I'm angry because this happened, this happened, this happened? Because the other thing that we all do, and I don't know if you've ever said this, but I hear this all the time. You make me mad. Like, really? That's not really actually correct. It's I'm angry that, and then you name what you're angry about. You called me a name. You didn't pick up my text. You are treating me different than my brother. Whatever it is, it's like if we can express the feeling and name the behavior that we're upset about, then the likelihood of these kids being heard, hopefully, if their parents have done any work and are able to engage in that way, that to me would be the third step to add, because that is so key, especially like you said, for boys, they have to learn to verbalize it. But I
Definitely, yeah.
love what you did with the first two steps, because I don't think they could do the third step right away. I think doing the exercise and the writing are perfect. Oh my God, I love that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. I also got another one where if someone's wickedly ADHD, we play chess.
Ooh,
They fucking
nice.
hate it, and they will hate it for about 4 months, but eventually they can actually sit down and strategize
Mm.
and
Oh,
not pay
how
attention
interesting.
to all the other sensory going on. You know, it's like one time we'll work out, the other time we'll play chess. You know, but again,
Mm.
that's just a different strategy of like how to deal with stuff. But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it's funny how people become uh, vulnerable and okay with being vulnerable post exercise. Like I have these conversations with adults,
Uh-huh.
and it's like it's usually after the workout. Because before it's like, hi, how's your day? Yeah, all right, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, sweet. Like, no problem. It's like trying to run through
Isn't that
treacle sometimes.
interesting? Yeah.
And then post workout, they just there you go, boom, you've got everything. You're like,
Wow.
oh, okay, cool. That's a bit of verbal diarrhea. Thank you very much for sharing that. You just adopted a dog with 3 legs and you're really happy, and your great aunt
Mm.
wanted to see pictures. And I'm like, I appreciate you wanted to tell me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's really key.
Humans are strange.
They are strange. They are absolutely strange. And I think there's a weird relationship with accountability that people don't want to own their mistakes, instead of saying, like, for the parents out there, it's like it's totally okay for you to go back to your kid and say, you know what, I yelled at you last night. That wasn't okay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to do better. Because to me, that has integrity. But this whole, how do you be accountable and really make it about that's being a good person, not being a bad person? Because no one gets off without making mistakes. We all are going to do that repeatedly because we're human.
Mm. It's separating the action from the individual, right? And
Yeah. And to
I
just own that, yeah, you know what? Even as parents, we mess up, but that
yeah.
can be a teaching moment, instead of even in relationship. When I say I'm sorry, even though I may be embarrassed, it's like I feel better about myself because at least I've owned it. So that brick is off my back. But if I
Mm.
don't and pretend, well, I don't want to get caught making this mistake, I don't want to admit what I did, I end up carrying that. And then that can also turn into anger or stress that comes out later in an unhealthy way.
To be honest, something that's helped me over the time is thinking about actions. as inherently good or bad, not the person.
Uh-huh.
Trying to go into every interaction of like, well, people have an innate goodness within them. It's like we can all
Mm-hmm.
mess up, right? We can all say the wrong
Right.
thing. We can all do the wrong thing. We can even do the horribly wrong thing.
Right.
You're like, okay, cool. Like that wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. But that situation or that action was the negative thing, not the individual. Because
Right.
in your mind, you'll just start demonizing that
Yeah.
person, and you're like, no, 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 like that's just going to bleed off into other interactions and conversations that you're going to have, and especially in a relationship, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if something's pissed you off, that action has
Right.
pissed you off, not the person, because you get this stir of discomfort and hatred, and it's like, no, just get rid of that.
Yeah, I get, it's funny when I teach my 4-week Zoom class for anger, the question I get the most from potential clients is, well, I'm not violent. So how, is this class going to be okay? And it's like, and they end up realizing that all these normal people struggle with anger, and they haven't been violent yet. They haven't done, they haven't beaten their wives, but they're angry and they don't know how to handle it well. And they
Yeah.
realize that anger doesn't make them a bad person, just like what you're saying. It's just a behavior that we need to look at and learn some tools so we can not hurt ourselves or anyone else.
Why do you think people struggle with emotions so much?
You know, I think it's really hard when you grow up in families like most of us did, where the parents don't handle their emotions well, or they don't have the tools to handle the day-to-day stress. So they don't have, one, the ability to model healthy emotions, and two, they don't have the bandwidth emotionally to handle their kids' emotions. So they try to, be quiet, go watch TV, do this, do that, instead of, it takes more work to figure out, okay, what am I feeling? What do I need to do? How do I need to take care of myself? What do I need to say in the moment? I mean, that is the harder way, and it's the harder way to parent. And a lot of us don't have the time or energy or inclination to want to do that extra work, sadly to say.
I often, I'm often humored by the definition of being an adult, right? Like you post 18 and that's it. You've kind of graduated. It's like,
Right.
congratulations. Like you can now do all
Right.
this different stuff. It's like, but what if I've like not changed and I still have like an
Right.
infant mindset, and, you're still a bit of
Right.
a destructed individual? Like, are you still an adult? Like,
Well, yeah, in some ways, but emotionally, that's where we may need to play catch up. I mean, thank God for the internet. There's so many more resources now, like your podcast and other things where people can tune in and learn some skills, and they don't
mm,
even have to pay for it, which is to me awesome, because I know there's always going to be a certain percentage of people that I never see in my office, but I can still help for free. And I love
mm.
doing that.
That's a really important point. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Again, conversations that I quite often have is like, okay, well, we can appeal to a certain demographic of folks, and
Right.
everything's a business. People got to make money. You got to pay
That's right.
bills. You deserve to live the life that you want to live, even if that is super luxurious.
Hmm.
If you work for it, of course, right?
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, how do we not let the barrier
Hmm.
of pennies stop folks from getting this, because then you're just
Yep.
creating that divide, right? And it's like, well,
Right.
then
Right.
maybe we need to tackle it in the education system of skills, which is a different bloody can of worms. Like that's hard going.
But could you imagine how society would be different if kids growing up learned these skills at age 5, 6, 7, 8? I mean, but then you have to teach them to the parents too, because you can't just do the kid, because if the kid learns the skills and goes home to a dysfunctional family every night,
Yeah,
it's like both have to happen.
yeah. I think we're seeing a big shift, right, where adults are being more aware of it. They're doing the
Yeah.
work. They're doing the work within their relationship and all that. And then they're also being a little bit scared of like, well, if I have a kid and mess this up, we're going to continue with this cycle, right? And then a lot more adults are now choosing to not
Hmm.
have kids, which again, do
Yeah,
whatever the hell
that's
you want,
true.
do whatever you want, right?
Right.
But I find it I find it quite interesting of like, okay, well, to create a positive cycle, people are stopping the cycle. You're like, well,
Yeah,
we've got to
yeah,
find out a middle
right,
ground here. It's got to be a
right.
happy medium of we can do it at the same time.
Well, yeah, and that's where if the parents can be accountable for their mistakes, I mean, imagine how different somebody's life would have been if in a dysfunctional family, their parents said they were sorry. That makes an impact because then you realize, oh, my parents were sorry. That must mean that behavior is not what they want to be doing versus I'm never going to apologize to my kid. I'm always right. So my child learns all these negative behaviors, assuming they're right. So it's like, that's where I love what you're saying because we have to dispel that myth that good parenting is perfect parenting because it's not. It's
Yeah,
making mistakes, but letting your kids see that, hey, you know what? You're working on it. Like all my people in my anger class, they tell their kids they're in an anger class because the kid is going to go, wow, really? Because the kid already knows that dad or mom have anger issues. They're living with it.
yeah.
So it's not a secret and it's not a bad secret. It's a, oh my God, dad or mom is definitely going to get this handled. And it gives the kid hope that things can get better.
It's that whole thing of hush hush, right? You create this
Yep.
kind of weird invisible barrier around certain topics that people
Yeah.
can't converse over. And it's like, no, that's only ever going to lead to something more negative in the future.
Right.
Like,
Right.
just be open. Like,
Yeah.
talk to
And
folks.
and it's okay to feel angry. And it's okay to say, I'm really mad right now. I can't talk. I have to go take a walk. Because when we're really hot, that's the last thing we need to be doing is talking. Because when your heart rate's over 100 beats per minute, you're not going to think clearly. You're not going to listen. You're going to actually misinterpret what's being said to you. So that's the worst time to have a conversation. So
I
that's when
think
we need to exit.
we also have to caveat a little bit, right? Like, we're talking about more of a thriving mode rather than folks stuck in a surviving mode of, you know,
Mm,
domestic violence or homelessness or drug and alcohol addiction or something like that, right? Where they're in the fray,
mhm.
they are in the hole, the abyss is
Yeah.
staring back at them.
Yeah.
What would you say? It's difficult, right? Because it's never really one thing.
Right.
What would you say? Where would you start for an individual who might be in that hole?
Hmm.
Where would you start with this whole? Okay, well, you've got a lot of anger clearly because it's associated
Right.
with all of them.
Right.
How do we start?
Well, by admitting that that's how you feel. And I mean, sometimes you can do that through writing. Like if someone doesn't have any money, just what you said, you could literally write down all the things that are making you upset. And there are lots of tools online. I have a free email course on anger that walks people through the initial skills. I mean, there's so many places to go now. They have low cost therapy, a lot of places. But just figuring out, okay, why are you angry? What's that about? And you might uncover, wow, you know what? I hate my job,
Mm.
or I don't have a job and I need help getting a job, or my relationships aren't working, or I feel bad about myself. I'm not as good as so and so out there. It's like if you can be honest with yourself about what you're angry about, that's going to tell you where your focus needs to be so that you can start to deal more with those issues.
It's wild how so many people struggle with self-acceptance.
Oh, yeah. Or, well, a lot of people didn't even hear I love you growing up, or they didn't get their parents' time and attention. So they learn to be small and hide themselves. And, that doesn't teach self-esteem. I mean, the goal is to be taught that you're good enough, not better than or less than anyone else. And that takes some skill.
Those three words, right? I love you. They're so
Right.
strong. And again, something that I spoke about with a member and a dear friend of mine recently.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were having a conversation and I was talking about love, right, and platonic love, and I said basically I think we got it all fucked up because we
Mm-hmm.
romanticize. Oh, it needs to
Yeah.
be this perfect,
Right.
Valentine's Day type stuff all the time. And you're like, well, can you not love your mates? It's like, oh, well,
Right.
yeah. I was like, well, do you tell them? And
Right.
the answer is more than likely going to be no. And you're like, well, okay, well, if you're single,
Right.
you're not in a relationship, how many times do you hear I love you? Probably when you
Right.
ring your parents, like what,
Yep.
once every 6 months? And that's it.
Oh,
It's
such an
like, well,
important point.
you can love someone and it not be sexual.
Right.
It's appreciating them being there. It's like it's okay, guys. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
love you and leave you. Just those
Uh-huh.
little
Yeah.
things mean so much to folks.
Right.
It could be everything. It could be their entire day.
I love that you bring that up because I think a lot of men look to their primary partner for that, but nowhere else. So that makes them glob on a little bit too tightly sometimes
Yeah,
because that's their only source of love versus, wait a minute, your mate is, your buddy, your mentor, people at work. I mean, there's love other places. I love that you bring that up because that's such a key point, especially for men.
definitely. And they do. They come across a little bit too obsessive and controlling
Sure,
because
because
that
all their
is
emotional eggs are in their basket, one
one
person's basket,
one
which
person.
never is going to work out well.
It gets overbearing. It's too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're placing too much load on somebody else's shoulders.
Right.
It's not
Yep.
fair.
That's true.
And you need to be able to express that with other people, even if it's just a barista that makes you coffee in the morning. Could be anyone,
Right.
even your
Right.
dog.
Yep. Even my dog.
I think that's probably why the whole thing came out of a man's best friend is a dog. It's because it's the only thing that they're emotive towards.
Yeah. Well, and they don't talk back. It's
And they
pretty easy.
and they don't talk back. Maybe that's why I like cats, because they give you a little bit of attitude.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They give
They're
you a
not
little
real
bit
needy.
back. No, you
Right.
got to
Dogs
earn
are
it.
much more needy.
They're not blind. You got to earn that stuff, and they will tell you when they're pissed off at you. Oh
Yep.
man,
Yep. They will.
you never know. You'd have to suck up to a cat because you've done something that you you shouldn't have or something.
That's so true.
I got 3 questions.
Yes.
What's the greatest piece of life advice you've ever received?
So years ago, I asked the therapist, when are these childhood issues ever going to leave? And she said, they're never going to leave, but you're going to be able to live with them. And I was like, oh, because I thought, the fantasy was I'll go to therapy, I'll fix everything and I'll be perfect. And when she said that, it really gave me a good, realistic expectation of, okay, I'm going to be able to learn to live with them because they're going to be at a much lower, they're not going to rule my life anymore. And that was really a profound piece of advice for me.
It's like it never gets easier. You just get stronger.
Yeah, but having realistic expectations is so helpful because then you're not always falling short.
That's it.
Yeah.
And expecting it to get easier, it would diminish the work that you're putting in.
Well, and I think, yeah, I think some ways it does get easier, but it never goes away entirely. And that
Yeah.
to me was the aha moment, like, oh, okay, I can't expect myself never to have any scars around childhood because everybody has them.
Yeah. And I think we need to check in on our skeletons before they check in on us.
Yep.
I
Love
think
that.
you got to actually go out and dig them up and give them a little bitch slap across the face and be like, listen, I'm the boss of you.
Yeah.
Rather than waiting for them to rear their ugly head in a situation
Right.
that they probably shouldn't.
That's true. If you have the courage to do it, awesome.
Yeah, you definitely need some balls.
Yeah, for
What's
sure.
the worst piece of life advice you've ever received?
So when I'm in grief, I have heard things because I've had a few losses lately. I've heard things like, well, that person wouldn't want you to be upset. What? Like when you're in grief, you're going to be sad. You're going to be upset. And to say stuff like that is just so invalidating, even though I know people mean well and they just want to comfort in a quick way to give you a quick band-aid. But yeah, I don't find it very helpful.
Yeah, everybody's quick to give you a little plaster, right? And it's like,
Yeah,
guys,
yeah,
sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes we just need a
that's
hug.
right. That's right.
This is
Well
shit.
said.
I'll sit with you. It's all
Yep.
right.
Yep.
I mean, what are the 3 words you tell your younger self?
I thought about this one and I think I only had, well, it's 4, but be kind to yourself.
Why?
Because it's so easy not to. And I think when I'm stuck, I have to remember to go back and be kind like I would a friend. Because I would always treat a friend better than I would myself naturally. But that's my reminder of, you know what, I need some grace. I need to be kind because I deserve it, just like you do.
Hmm. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Time's flown. It's been an
I
honor and a
know.
privilege.
I kind of thought that.
Right. You have a wonderful day, and I hope you're kind to yourself.
You too.
Thanks, boss. We'll speak soon.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.